The guards were never supposed to be told what to do. That was the whole point. And yet, before a single prisoner walked through the door, Philip Zimbardo pulled his guards aside and told them exactly how to behave: aggressively, dominantly, cruelly. The experiment that textbooks have cited for 50 years as proof of humanity's dark nature, it was staged. But here's the question that should keep you watching. If the experiment was manipulated from the start, if the guards were coached, the conditions were engineered, and the researcher himself was playing a role, then how did it still spiral so far out of control that real people suffered real psychological breakdowns? That answer is darker than anything Zimbardo ever published. It's August 14th, 1971. Stanford University, Palo Alto, California. Philip Zimbardo is 38 years old. He is not a fringe academic. He is a rising star in social psychology, already known for his work on de-individuation, the idea that anonymity strips people of their moral identity. He has a theory, a specific, unsettling theory. He believes that ordinary people placed inside a corrupt system will become corrupt themselves, not because they are evil, because the system makes them evil. To test this, he converts the basement of Jordan Hall, Stanford's psychology building, into a mock prison. Not a suggestion of a prison, a real one. Cells with steel bars, a solitary confinement closet they call the hole, a yard, a guard station, the whole architecture of institutional control built into a university hallway. The budget is $15,000, the equivalent of roughly $100,000 today, funded directly by the U.S. Office of Naval Research. The military wants to understand why prisons riot, why authority breaks down. Zimbardo wants to understand something bigger. He places an ad in the Palo Alto Times. He recruits 24 young men, college students mostly, psychologically screened, physically healthy, no criminal history. He flips a coin literally, to decide who becomes a guard and who becomes a prisoner. On the morning of August 14th, local police arrive at the homes of the prisoners without warning. They arrest them. Real handcuffs, real squad cars, neighbors watching from front lawns. The men are booked, blindfolded, and driven to the basement of Jordan Hall. The experiment is scheduled to run for 14 days. It will not last 6. But before it ends, something happens that Zimbardo will spend the next 47 years trying to explain away, and that a single leaked audio recording in 2018 will finally expose. Remember the question from the opening about how a manipulated experiment could still produce genuine psychological collapse? We're getting there. But first, you need to understand what Zimbardo actually did before the cameras started rolling. Before the experiment began, Zimbardo handed his guards a set of instructions. He told them to create feelings of boredom, frustration, fear, and a sense of arbitrariness. He told them that prisoners should feel powerless, that guards should feel in control. He didn't just observe human behavior, he prescribed it. His undergraduate research assistant, David Jaffe, a 22-year-old student who had no formal training in ethics or psychology, helped write the guard orientation manual. Jaffe later became the warden inside the simulation. He was not a neutral observer. He was an actor in the drama, with a direct line to Zimbardo. Stop. Before we go further, you need to understand something. This is the part that makes the Stanford Prison Experiment so much more disturbing than most people realize. The guards who behaved cruelly didn't just drift into cruelty. Some of them were nudged, encouraged, corrected when they weren't being harsh enough. One guard, later known by his pseudonym John Wayne, became particularly sadistic, waking prisoners at 2 a.m., forcing them to do push-ups, making them clean toilets with their bare hands. Zimbardo later described him as a naturally emerging authoritarian, But recordings and interviews suggest something different. That guard has said in subsequent interviews that he was performing a role, that he modeled his behavior on a character, that he was, in his own words, acting. And yet, and this is the part that should genuinely disturb you, the prisoners didn't know that. To the prisoners, it was real. Within 36 hours, prisoner 8612, a young man named Douglas Corpy, began screaming, crying, throwing himself against the walls of his cell. He demanded to be released. Zimbardo's team initially suspected he was faking it, trying to get out of the experiment. They told him he couldn't leave, that he had an obligation, that he was a prisoner now, not a volunteer. He was not faking it. By day 3, a prisoner named Richard Yako organized a rebellion. The prisoners barricaded their cells. The guards responded with fire extinguishers, blasting cold CO2 through the bars to break up the resistance. Zimbardo watched. He did not intervene. He escalated. He called in a former prisoner, a man who had served 17 years in California's Soledad State Prison, to act as a consultant. The man's name was Carlo Prescott. He looked at what was happening in that basement and reportedly told Zimbardo it was becoming too real. Zimbardo kept going. By day 5, the experiment had generated something no psychology study had produced before, a genuine crisis of conscience inside the research team itself. And it came from the one person Zimbardo did not expect. At the 6-minute mark of this story, you're sitting with a question. If the researchers knew this was harmful, why did no one stop it sooner? 50 people cycled through that basement over 6 days, graduate students, observers, research assistants, a Catholic priest who visited to counsel the prisoners, a public defender who came to advise them on their rights. Almost all of them played along. They accepted the frame. They treated it as real. The system had absorbed them. That is the actual finding of the Stanford Prison Experiment. Not that guards become monsters, but that institutions, even fake ones, have a gravitational pull that is almost impossible to resist once you're inside them. Almost impossible. On the evening of August 19th, day 5, a 27-year-old graduate student named Christina Maslach visited the experiment for the first time. She was Zimbardo's girlfriend. She would later become his wife. She walked into that basement and watched guards force prisoners to walk in a line, bags over their heads, hands on each other's shoulders, shuffling to the bathroom in the middle of the night. She walked out. She was shaking. She told Zimbardo, "What you're doing to those boys is a terrible thing." Of the roughly 50 people who had visited or participated in that study, she was the only one who said it out loud. Zimbardo later admitted he had become so consumed by his role as prison superintendent that he had lost his own perspective entirely. He wasn't observing the experiment. He was inside it. The next morning, August 20th, 1971, day 6, he ended it. Now here's the answer to the question we raised at the very beginning. How did a manipulated experiment still produce genuine psychological collapse? Because manipulation and reality are not mutually exclusive. The guards may have been coached, the conditions may have been engineered, but the prisoner's fear was real. The sleep deprivation was real. The humiliation was real. The power differential was real. You can construct a false situation and still cause genuine harm inside it. That is, in fact, one of the oldest lessons in human history, and one that Zimbardo either failed to grasp or chose to ignore. In 2018, journalist Ben Blum published a piece in Medium that included leaked audio recordings from the experiment. In one recording, you can hear Zimbardo's team pressuring a guard to be more aggressive. In another, you hear researchers coaching behavior rather than observing it. The recordings confirmed what critics had suspected for decades. The experiment's most dramatic results were, at least in part, produced by the experimenters themselves. The study that had been cited in psychology textbooks for 47 years, used to explain Abu Ghraib, used to justify theories of institutional evil, translated into films, documentaries, and TED Talks, was built on a foundation that could not hold, and Zimbardo knew. He had always known. The question is what that means for everything built on top of it. The American Psychological Association today lists the Stanford Prison Experiment as a landmark case study in research ethics violations, not in human behavior, in research ethics. That reframing matters because the experiment's influence did not stay inside academia. After Zimbardo published his findings in 1973, the study entered the cultural bloodstream. It became shorthand for a specific idea that ordinary people, given power and anonymity, will inevitably abuse both. Politicians cited it, military officials cited it. After the Abu Ghraib prison abuse scandal broke in 2004, Zimbardo himself testified as an expert witness, arguing that the soldiers who tortured detainees were victims of a corrupt system, not perpetrators of personal evil. He wrote an entire book about it. The Lucifer Effect, published in 2007, a bestseller. The problem is that the experiment's core claim, that random assignment to guard or prisoner roles produces abuse without any external pressure, was never actually demonstrated because there was external pressure. Zimbardo applied it himself. What the experiment actually showed, stripped of its mythology, is something narrower and arguably more important, that researchers can lose their objectivity, that institutions, including scientific ones, can normalize harm incrementally, step by step, until someone from the outside has to walk in and say, stop. That power over a study's narrative is itself a form of power that can be abused. Christina Maslach, the woman who ended the experiment, went on to become one of the world's leading researchers on workplace burnout. She spent her career studying what happens to people when systems demand too much and offer too little protection. Her work has influenced labor law, hospital policy, and corporate culture on every continent. Zimbardo continued to defend the experiment for decades. Only in his later years did he begin to acknowledge its methodological problems. Carefully, partially, never fully. The 24 young men who participated have had complicated relationships with their own roles ever since. Some have spoken publicly, some have not. Douglas Corpy, prisoner 8612, the first to break, later said his breakdown was partly performed, that he wanted to leave and use distress as an exit strategy. But he also said the environment was genuinely frightening. Both things were true simultaneously. That's the part that stays with you. We want clean lessons from history. We want experiments that prove things neatly. But the Stanford Prison Experiment's real legacy is a warning about the stories we tell to make sense of human behavior, and how easily those stories can be shaped by the people with the most to gain from a particular conclusion. The next time someone tells you that a study proves human nature is fundamentally dark, ask one question. Who designed the conditions? Because the experiment doesn't just tell us something about guards and prisoners. It tells us something about the people holding the clipboard. If this story surprised you, subscribe. We put one of these out every week. And next time, there's a country that built the most sophisticated surveillance system in human history. Not to watch its enemies, but to watch its own citizens. And the company that helped them build it, you've probably used their products today.